I'm with Dan Diker from Voice of Israel. Now, Dan, what is Voice of Israel?
Voice of Israel is a broadcast network that specializes in online global radio, began in late 2014 for the first time ever in the state of Israel. It's a station broadcasting out of Jerusalem that is broadcasting by Israelis about Israel and the Middle East from an Israeli point of view.
And what sort of subjects do you discuss?
We discuss everything on Voice of Israel, from politics and diplomacy to culture, the arts, health, personalities, newsmakers, news of the day. And we basically cover everything there is to cover. What's interesting about Voice of Israel is it actually engages all the voices of Israel: Jewish voices, Muslim voices, Christian voices, Druze voices, Circassian voices, voices of all the many different populations and communities in Israel. And this is very unusual because most radio stations here, I would venture to say, and all radio stations that are foreign radio stations, do not cover the depth and the breadth of what Israel is all about. And that's what we want to do, is to reveal Israel from the inside.
Is politics a very, very important thing here in the Holy Land?
Everyone lives politics. They eat and drink and breathe politics. And that's why at the beginning of every hour, with the three beeps that you hear on the government radio stations, and you hear first and foremost politics and diplomacy and security issues, which are really the three major issues that define people's lives here. Not to mention, of course, the economic challenges, but people here live from hour to hour waiting to hear any sort of security or diplomatic or political developments, because things shift in Israel and the Middle East so quickly that you sometimes forget that an hour earlier you heard something totally different.
And who presents shows on your network?
That's a good question. We have 8 different show hosts. They come from across the political spectrum. I'm actually a show host. I host the show called National Security, which is a show that I wanted to appeal to the broadest possible audience from all different religious and cultural and ethnic backgrounds. And it's all about, for example, the national security issues of Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people, and the Arab and Muslim world as well, and also the destiny of Christians in the Middle East, the challenges of ISIS, the challenges of a nuclearizing Iranian regime. What is terrorism, counterterrorism all about? How do we understand this very complicated region from a security point of view? So that's just one show. But we also have wonderful programs. One of our great programs is called The Big Falafel, referring to the Middle Eastern food that we eat, the little balls of chickpeas. And that is The Big Falafel is a show that is hosted by Molly Livingstone, who's a well-known comedian and writer and commentator. And that's a wonderful program on Israeli culture and Israeli newsmakers, on feminism, on the state of religious affairs, on multiculturalism, on interfaith cooperation. It's really so that's how broad it gets. And in the middle, we have shows like Israel Inspired for the evangelical Christian world, that is run by 2 rabbis, actually, very hip young rabbis, Jeremy Gimpel and Ari Abramowitz, and they have become very popular in the North American evangelical community, particularly. And we invite our Christian brothers and sisters as well to come in and listen, to people who are amenable to Israel, people who love Israel. This is the station for you. We bring Israel from a positive light. We also we're a news station. We also broadcast the news as it is, straight news, but we're talk radio. And in talk radio, our show host, you can voice an opinion, and we engage other opinions, and we're the most democratic, free, open, radio station, I think, in the world.
Why do you think Christians love Israel?
Well, that's a question I should ask you. Well, I think Christians and Jews share so much more than we don't share, and that we share values, we share history, we share this land. Christianity is Jesus, and the Christian tradition is an outgrowth of Jews and Judaism in the Old Testament. And I think we Jewish, the concept of Christian love and Jewish love are actually very, very close, extremely close, in fact. And in fact, that love is expressed through the land of Israel, the Holy Land, the land that God gave to the Jewish people, and in the land that became holy to Christians. And this is what this type of engagement and this type of embrace of Israel is what Voice of Israel reflects every single day in its broadcasting and its programming. And I think it really reflects a great chain of historical drama, and in that drama is a lot of love. Look, the relationship between Christians and Jews hasn't been easy through the centuries, but I think today we're living in very, very special times. And I think that both Christians and Jews are coming to a deep understanding that because of the threat of radical Islam, we had better stand shoulder to shoulder and embrace one another and show profound respect for one another, also on religious terms and also in every other way, because we are facing clash of civilization and we're on the same side of that civilization.
Now, you have a show called National Security. Where do you see Israel today, security-wise?
Security-wise, Israel, on the one hand, is in a very complicated situation. If you look at a snapshot of the Middle East, Israel is surrounded by Iranian regime proxies, where we are threatened by Hezbollah in the north. The Hezbollah organization is an Iranian-backed organization. They get their salaries from Tehran. They get their directions from Khomeini. From Khamenei in Tehran. They are ideologically driven by the Iranians, and they have 100,000 rockets pointed at every place in Israel. And to the south, we have Hamas, which is also in part backed by Iran, as well as backed by Qatar and backed by Libya with Libyan weapons. And since Israel got out of Gaza, lock, stock, and barrel, in order to help the Palestinians develop the first part of their state, that instead of turning into a gorgeous state that anybody in Europe, the United Kingdom, or the United States, or anywhere in the world would be very proud of, they turned it into hell in the Mediterranean. They turned it into a terrorist enclave that actually created a forward base for the Iranian regime. So that's the south. And thank God, Israel now has a very strong alliance with the Egyptians, who are facing the same Hamas threat from their point of view. And just very recently, there were scores of Egyptian soldiers that were killed in the Sinai Desert by Hamas and ISIS, by the way. What's called ISIS Sinai, the ISIS Sinai contingent. So they're facing radical Islamic terror as well. But from Israel's point of view, we have more threats than just Hamas and Hezbollah. We're facing, we have Iran sending weapons to Gaza through the peninsula, through the Sinai Peninsula. We face Sudan. We face enemies that are threatening the Iraqi regime, that are Iranian-based, and obviously we're being threatened by nuclear annihilation from Iran itself. So I don't think there's any other country in the world that has such a terrible security situation. On the other hand, Israel is more unified and united today among its people than it has been in a long, long time. And that you can see in a very strong move to the political center-right from the political center-left over the last 20 years, because Israelis feel that they have made concessions, especially to the Palestinians, and every concession of land that Israel has made has created a void of territory, and into that void has slipped radical Islamic terror. It's true in Lebanon when we left Lebanon unilaterally. It was true in Gaza when we left Gaza unilaterally. And there are all those naysayers that said, well, you left unilaterally, you didn't hand it off to someone, you didn't come to an agreement with someone. It really does not reflect the fact. The facts are, every time there's a vacuum of in sovereignty or a vacuum of territory, radical Islam sucks up that vacuum and then and uses it as a forward base to attack Israel.
Now we keep hearing on the news that Iran is getting closer and closer to its nuclear weapons. Why isn't anything happening?
Well, there are a lot of things happening. The question is what is happening good or bad or helpful or dangerous? And there are many people in Israel, beginning with the Prime Minister, that believe that the what's called the P5+1, the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council plus Germany, are making a deal that is potentially very dangerous for Israel's existence, and that they are leaving Iran with the capability of being a nuclear threshold state by not prohibiting all uranium enrichment 100% completely. And Israel, one of the reasons I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is insisting to accept the invitation by Speaker Boehner of the U.S. Congress is that he wants to tell the world that if nobody will protect the Jews, as they didn't in Europe in 1941, 2, 3, 4, 5, that Israel will do everything to protect itself.
Now, ISIS is in Syria and Iraq. Are they a big threat to Israel? Israel has one of the best armies in the world. So are they actually a threat to Israel?
It's very true that Israel has one of the best armies in the world. There's a real challenge for conventional armies to defeat terrorist insurgencies and terrorist groups because they work in ways that are very different from conventional armies. So, while Israel has a good record in defeating the armies of its Arab neighbors, which is basically done every single time that its Arab neighbors had threatened Israel, in terrorist groups, it's much more difficult. They operate in civilian areas. They take women and children of their own side hostage. For example, we saw in the terror war by Hamas in 2014, the summer of 2014, which was the third terror war that Hamas foisted upon Israel. We saw that Hamas actually sacrificed its own children as cannon fodder in fighting, in sending rockets into Israeli kindergartens. So they were actually threatening their own children by using them as human shields to protect the terrorists while they were attempting to kill our children in our kindergartens.
Do you feel yourself that you're in a battle to get people's minds?
This is a battle for hearts and minds. I mean, if that's the question, there's a very important diplomatic, political, and media battle going on, and it's the battle for ideas. It's the battle for hearts and minds. If you look at ISIS, by the way, the Islamic State, they have the most sophisticated Hollywood type of technology that they use. If you just take the highly produced movie of the burning alive of the Jordanian pilot as an example, there are many that say that he was killed, but he wasn't burned in the way it looked on the video. That video was completely produced and doctored according to technology, and it actually happened in a different way. And they make major film productions out of every murderous terrorist attack and punitive measure that they take in order to create the force multiplier effect of the terrorism that they foist upon people. Now that, as you and I know, terrorism traditionally is a very psychological medium, and that terrorists want to expand their terrorism psychologically, cognitively, by using the media. When this is as old as this is as old as the media gets. I mean, in a psychological sense. But what happened today, because of the advent of technology, the cognitive warfare has become a much more important element in the terrorist toolbox than it has been in the past.
What do you think of the international media outlets here in the land?
Well, there are more international media outlets here in the land of Israel, than there are anywhere in the world besides Washington, D.C. And when we have a conflict with our neighbors, we have a war, it can get to 1,400 or 1,500 journalists from all over the world. It's unheard of anywhere in the world to have that type of media coverage. And in large sense, the media coverage, as Maddie, the former AP reporter, Maddie, forgotten his last name, it's not Steinberg, but I'll think of it, but it spoke about, is that the journalists are, in large part, not uneducated as to the historical context and the facts of the case. And people automatically in the international media side with the Palestinians because they perceive the Palestinians to be the weak side, and they naturally side with what they perceive to be the weak side against what they perceive to be the strong side. And therefore, a lot of the reporting goes very, very skewed. There's a lot of Pallywood. There has been found to be a lot of staging of events. We saw that in the war last year with Gaza, and a number of journalists came clean and admitted that things were not being reported properly. But we've found that many journalists, not all, but many journalists have become children of the revolution and really side with the Palestinians from a political point of view, and are not are really judging Israel when they should be reporting on Israel, and they're reporting from the point of view of the Palestinians much more than the point of view of Israel, because reporting from the point of view of the Palestinians really creates headlines. Because journalists like to go where there's war, fire, and unfortunately death and destruction more than they do calm and in an orderly state like Israel. So it actually hurt us that Israel defended itself very well against Hamas, and when rockets are falling and no one gets killed, it's not news.
Do you feel like you're battling anti-Semitism?
Oh, there's definitely a new wave of anti-Semitism, and what we're seeing now is that anti-Semitism has become a new type of political anti-Semitism, where the target is the Jewish state, and the people in the Jewish state as a collective anti-Semitism, as opposed to individual anti-Semitism that continues to rage on. As we know, in the United Kingdom and in France, it's become much, much worse these days. But it's become worse because the culprit, according to the anti-Semites, is Israel, and in their minds, it's completely politically acceptable to blame Israel because you're not really singling out what is known as the weak Jew, but you're actually hitting a state. So they look at that as being politically correct, when in fact it is. I think it is far more anti-Semitic than just targeting one person. They're targeting 8 million Israelis as opposed to individual Jews.
We've said that Israel has one of the best armies in the world. Is Israel winning the media war?
That's a very good question. Is Israel meeting the media war? I would venture to say no. Israel is not meeting, because all the cards are stacked against Israel in the media war. You can have the best spokesman in the world and spokeswomen. You can have the best media relations. But if the media decides that it's going to use its medium as a weapon against you, they will use it, and they're using it very effectively. The most important thing for Israel is to make sure that its internal media, that its political, that its body politic, that its public is unified, and then so when Israel is unified and united, then it can stand up against anything. Clearly, though, the international media and bloggers and media outlets have not, by and large, taken any kind of an objective or fair position regarding Israel, because, as I said just a few minutes ago, they perceive Israel as the stronger player. And in the Middle East, when you're strong, you're wrong, and when you're weak, you're right.
And what's your prayer for the website, for the radio station itself?
Well, my prayer for the website is that it can attract lots and lots and lots of Christian friends of Israel. And lots of Jews, so that people get the real story out of Israel. This is the real story, and the real story is in the distinctions and in all the voices that come out of Israel, out of Christians and Jews and Muslims and others as well, and to really get a much deeper understanding, to gain that understanding and that knowledge and that familiarity with the richness of Israel. This is the richness of the Holy Land. This is God's promise from 3,000 years ago that has come true. It's come true, and we're living it right here in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. This is the best weapon against the delegitimization, the demonization, the criminalization, and the anti-Semitism against Israel is the voice of Israel, because we bring we reveal the true heart and soul of Israel through all the voices that make up this great nation state of the Jewish people.
Now Christians haven't been particularly friends with Israel in the past. Do you think that Jews are now beginning to see Christians as friends?
Oh, definitely, especially Jews in Israel. We have in the Knesset, in Israel's parliament, we have something called the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, and it's an official caucus of the parliament in Israel, and it is very well known that millions of Christians around the world, I would even say hundreds of millions of Christians around the world, they pray for the Holy Land, they pray for the Jews. Israelis, Jewish Israelis anyway, are very, very gratified by the support that they get from Christians around the world. And in the North American scene, it creates a challenge for a lot of liberal North American Jews who are more suspect of their Christian counterparts in America on the evangelical side, where there are 85 million evangelical Christians, because many Jews in America feel sort of threatened, not theologically threatened, but they feel threatened that they're constantly being targeted for conversion to Christianity, where in Israel that's not the case. In Israel, we feel that we have many different, obviously, churches that are 2,000 years old, and in Israel feels it has a responsibility to be the custodian, the sovereign custodian of Christian history. This is very, very important, and what we do hope is that more and more Christians recognize the importance of the Holy Land in the Christian tradition itself, because we know in Christianity there's been a broad gap between those Christians that appreciate their own tradition without regard to the Holy Land, not being land-centered, and then perhaps the growing move in some Christian circles, more evangelical circles, to recognize how important the Holy Land is and how it's important to protect it and support the Jewish people who are the custodians and not only the custodians, but in a way the parents and the grandparents for Christians and all the Christian holy sites that Israeli soldiers defend with their own bodies to make sure that the land is safe for Christians to worship in and to embrace and celebrate as Jews do their own culture and their own religion in the land of Israel.
And what's your website for people who'd like to know more?
So come to Voice of Israel. It's voiceofisrael.com, one word, voiceofisrael.com, and enjoy the best, most dramatic, funniest, extraordinary content from whatever background and political view you come to. You will get the best content of any English language media in the world on Israel, on the Middle East. And come to voiceofisrael.com. I guarantee that you will be delighted with your choice.
Okay, Dan Diker, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.